Dale Earnhardt Jr. helped revive interest in the Cars Tour by purchasing it through Motorsports in 2023. His goal was to give Cup Series stars a place to race for the love of it, to keep the grassroots level of the sport healthy, and to introduce new fans to the kind of racing that built NASCAR in the first place. Several Cup Series drivers have made appearances at Cars Tour events over the past few years, including drivers like Dale Jr., himself, William Byron, Chase Briscoe, and now planned for Kyle Busch. The fact that Kyle Busch wanted to race in the Cars Tour tells you everything about who he was as a competitor. He had won everything you could win at the Cup level. He had 2 championships, over 60 wins, a spot in NASCAR history that nobody could take from him. And yet, he wanted to drive a late model. He wanted to race for the love of racing, not for the points or the prize money or the media attention. That is the kind of competitor Kyle Busch was. Not someone who showed up only when the cameras were rolling. Not someone who needed $1 million prize to fire up his engine. He raced because he loved racing, at every level, in every kind of car, on every kind of track. And his planned appearance in Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s No. 8 late model on May 30th was supposed to be one more expression of that love. Honestly, my take as a fan listening to Dale Jr. share this story is simple. This conversation, this collaboration, this paint scheme, it would have been one of the best NASCAR moments of the entire 2026 season. 2 former rivals, now friends, sharing a race car at a grassroots event. Kyle Busch returning to the No. 8 paint scheme that meant something to both of them. Dale Earnhardt Jr. acting as the team owner for one of the most accomplished drivers in NASCAR history. That race was going to be special. That race would have generated coverage. That race would have created memories that NASCAR fans would have talked about for years. And it never happened. The seat fitting did not take place. The paint scheme never got finalized. The race on May 30th will go on without Kyle Busch in the field. Dale Jr.'s late model will sit in the garage unused while the Cars Tour holds its event. For Dale Jr., personally, this loss is significant in ways that go beyond the friendship itself. He lost his father, Dale Earnhardt Sr., in February 2001 at the Daytona 500. He has lived through what it means to lose a fellow driver, a family member, and a friend in a tragic, public way. Now, 25 years later, he has had to process losing another peer, in another sudden and heartbreaking circumstance. The way Dale Jr. has handled both of those losses is something every NASCAR fan has watched closely. He has been respectful. He has been honest. He has shared what he can and protected what he should. The fact that he chose to share the final text conversation with Kyle Busch on his podcast was a deliberate decision. He wanted fans to know what kind of person Kyle Busch was. He wanted to share a piece of who Kyle was when the spotlight was off. And he did it the way Dale Jr. does everything, with quiet, dignified storytelling that lets the listener feel the weight of the moment without ever having to manufacture emotion. And here is what makes the next few weeks so important for the broader NASCAR community. Because the way Dale Jr.'s reveal landed with fans tells you something significant about how the sport is processing this loss collectively. The grief is not over. The stories are still coming out. And every new revelation about Kyle Busch's final days is going to be part of how this entire era of NASCAR is remembered. So to wrap it all up, Dale Earnhardt Jr. revealed on his May 26th podcast episode that he had been texting Kyle Busch the day before he passed away about racing a late model in the Cars Tour at a May 30th event. Kyle Busch wanted to run Dale Jr.'s iconic number 8 paint scheme. The two had agreed to meet that Thursday for a seat fitting. The plans were ordinary. The plans never happened. And the friendship between 2 former NASCAR rivals, who had evolved over years into mutual respect and shared passion for racing, ended in the most heartbreaking way possible. And here is the line I want you to remember. The most powerful goodbyes are the ones we never knew were goodbyes. Kyle Busch's final text to Dale Earnhardt Jr. was about racing, about paint schemes, about planning ahead. Nothing dramatic, nothing final. Just 2 friends talking about the next race. That is the most honest portrait of who Kyle Busch was that we are ever going to get. A racer until the very end. The day before Kyle Busch passed away, he was making plans, real plans, not hospital plans, not goodbye plans. He was texting Dale Earnhardt Jr. about which paint scheme to run on a late model race car. The 2 of them had agreed that Kyle Busch was going to drive Dale Jr.'s late model in the Cars Tour. They were going to meet that Thursday at Dale Jr.'s shop to bring over Kyle's seat. None of that conversation sounded like a goodbye. None of it sounded like the words of a man who knew he had hours left. And that is what makes Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s reveal on his podcast last week one of the most genuinely heartbreaking pieces of NASCAR storytelling we have ever heard. Because the final conversation between two of the biggest names in the sport was completely ordinary. And ordinary, in this context, is somehow the saddest thing of all. And honestly, as a fan listening to Dale Jr. share this story, you understood immediately what he was trying to convey. The pain in his voice was not just about losing a fellow driver. It was about losing a friend whose last text was about racing, about paint schemes, about building something together that never got to happen. And as a NASCAR fan, that detail tells you everything you need to know about who Kyle Busch was and about what this sport just lost. So today we are breaking down two connected stories. One is exactly what Dale Earnhardt Jr. shared on his podcast about his final text conversation with Kyle Busch the day before he died. The other is the bigger story of how two of NASCAR's most heated rivals slowly became friends over the years, and what their planned Cars Tour collaboration was supposed to represent. And hey, real quick, if you are new here, go ahead and drop a like and subscribe. This channel is just getting started. We are pushing for 1,000 subscribers. And if you are a NASCAR fan who wants honest, respectful coverage of the sport during this difficult time, you are in the right place. Welcome to Freedom Line News. All right, let's get into the first story, because what Dale Earnhardt Jr. shared on his podcast last week is one of those NASCAR moments that hits different the longer you sit with it. Let me walk you through exactly what he said. On the May 26th episode of his podcast, The Dale Jr. Download, Dale Earnhardt Jr. opened up about his final conversation with Kyle Busch. The setting was the week after Busch's passing on Thursday, May 21st, just days after the entire NASCAR community had gathered at Charlotte Motor Speedway for what CNN called a memorial service with 95,000 guests. Dale Jr. began his story by setting the context. He said, quote, "I was texting with him the day before he passed away about getting together this Thursday to bring his seat for his late model over to my shop." Read that again. The day before Kyle Busch passed away, they were texting about getting together that Thursday. The same Thursday Kyle Busch would be hospitalized. The same Thursday Kyle Busch would pass away from severe pneumonia that progressed into sepsis. Dale Jr. continued, quote, "We had agreed that he was going to race our car in the Cars Tour." That single sentence carries so much weight, because for those who do not follow the Cars Tour, this is a regional late model racing series in the southeastern United States that Dale Earnhardt Jr. helps run. Late model racing is grassroots NASCAR. It is the kind of racing that drivers do for the love of the sport, not for championship points or seven-figure paychecks. And the fact that Kyle Busch, a two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion with over 60 Cup wins, was making plans to compete in a regional grassroots series tells you something important about who he was as a racer. He never stopped loving the actual racing. Dale Jr. then revealed the most heartbreaking detail of all. He told the podcast audience that Busch had been texting him from the hospital, focused on planning ahead for the May 30th race. Even as his health was deteriorating, even as he was being treated, Kyle Busch was thinking about racing, about paint schemes, about showing up. Dale Jr. shared the exact exchange. Quote, "He's texting me and he's like, 'What scheme we going to run?' And I was like, 'You can run any scheme you want.'" That line is devastating, because Kyle Busch wanted to run Dale Jr.'s iconic number 8 paint scheme, the same number 8 that Dale Jr. drove during the early years of his career when he was racing for Dale Earnhardt Inc., the same No. 8 that became one of the most beloved car numbers in NASCAR history because of who drove it, and the same No. 8 that Kyle Busch had been carrying himself for the past 3 seasons at Richard Childress Racing. That symbolism is something only longtime NASCAR fans will fully appreciate. The number 8 was Dale Jr.'s number first. He turned it into something that meant something to an entire generation of NASCAR fans. Then Kyle Busch took that same number and turned it into the next chapter of his own career at RCR. And now, in his final days, Kyle Busch wanted to come back to the No. 8 one more time on a late model at a regional Cars Tour race with Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s blessing. Dale Jr. could not give him the okay fast enough. "You can run any scheme you want," he said. The two of them were going to bring that vision to life. The seat fitting was scheduled for Thursday. The race was set for May 30th. And then everything stopped. But here is what makes this story even more meaningful. Because the friendship between Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kyle Busch was not something that just happened. It was built over years of being heated rivals first, before slowly evolving into mutual respect. And the way that friendship developed tells you something powerful about both men. Let me walk you through how it happened. So here is the second story. And this is the one that gives the final text conversation its full context. The relationship between Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kyle Busch was for many years one of the most genuine rivalries in modern NASCAR. Their on-track history goes back to the mid-2000s when Kyle Busch was a young, aggressive driver coming up through Hendrick Motorsports, and Dale Jr. was the most popular driver in the sport, racing for Dale Earnhardt Inc. and later for Hendrick. They competed against each other for years. They had on-track incidents. They had radio frustrations. They had moments where the NASCAR media built up their conflicts because it made for great storytelling. And then time happened. Both drivers aged. Both drivers gained perspective. Dale Jr. retired from full-time Cup Series racing after the 2017 season. Kyle Busch continued racing at the highest level for another 7 years before making his move to Richard Childress Racing in 2023. And as the years passed, the rivalry started to soften. The mutual respect that had always been there underneath the competition started to come out into the open. Dale Jr. described it himself on the podcast. He talked about how their relationship had evolved into a friendship rooted in mutual respect and a shared passion for racing beyond the Cup Series garage. Both men loved racing, not just Cup Series racing, racing in general. Late models, trucks, dirt cars, whatever was on the schedule. They both came from racing families. They both lived and breathed the sport at every level. The Cars Tour collaboration was supposed to be the perfect expression of that shared passion. A regional late model series, no championship points on the line, no Cup Series pressure. Just two veterans of the sport, both racing for the love of it, with one driving the other's car in a paint scheme that meant something to both of them. That was the plan. Dale Jr. shared something else on the podcast that hit hard for any NASCAR fan listening. He talked about what he has been learning about Kyle Busch in the days since he passed. He said, quote, "What I've enjoyed, I guess, is learning more about Kyle the person. We know who he is on the racetrack. We know how he is on the racetrack and in the media, and so forth. What he was like at the track with the suit on and in that environment. I knew him on a personal level." He continued, "Hearing how he interacted and how he was to others, the joke they may have shared in a text. I've really enjoyed learning who he was away from the track and how he interacted and engaged or treated or talked to other people, and it's been good." Read that quote again. Dale Jr. is essentially saying that even as a peer, as someone who had texted Kyle Busch within 24 hours of his death, as someone who had agreed to share a race car with him, even with all of that personal connection, Dale Jr. is still discovering new sides of who Kyle Busch was as a person. The jokes Kyle shared with others, the way he treated people, the conversations he had outside of the spotlight, all of those small details that nobody outside of Busch's inner circle ever saw. That is the most powerful thing about losing someone who lived a public life. You realize how much of their actual life was private, how much of who they were never made it onto television, how much was reserved for the people closest to them, and how much of that, when they are gone, the world will never get to see. And here is what makes this whole story so emotionally significant for the broader NASCAR community. Because the planned Cars Tour race was not just about Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kyle Busch. It was about something bigger, the kind of racing that exists outside of the Cup Series spotlight. And what it represented for both men, and for the future of the sport, is something every fan should understand. Here is the bigger picture. The Cars Tour is a regional late model racing series in the southeastern United States. It is not a national series. It is not a $1 million prize series. It is grassroots racing in its purest form. Drivers race on smaller tracks at smaller venues in front of smaller crowds. The cars are simpler. The technology is older. The competition is fierce, but the spotlight is dim. If you are a NASCAR fan, this is the kind of story that stays with you forever. Not because of the championship implications, not because of the point standings, not because of the headline, but because we got to see, through Dale Jr.'s words, what kind of man Kyle Busch was when the cameras were off. He was making plans, he was excited about a race, he was a racer. That is who he was, and that is who we lost. Rest in peace, Kyle Busch. Dale Earnhardt Jr. shared a small piece of you with the world on his podcast, and the entire NASCAR community is better for hearing it. Now I want to hear from you. What was the most powerful part of Dale Jr.'s podcast reveal for you? Did you know that Kyle Busch was planning to race in the Cars Tour at Dale Jr.'s shop? And what does this story tell you about who Kyle Busch was as a person, beyond the Cup Series headlines? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I really want to know what you are feeling. And if you are a NASCAR fan who wants honest, respectful coverage of the sport during this difficult time, subscribe to Freedom Line News. The channel is brand new, and we are pushing toward our first 1,000 subscribers together as NASCAR fans. If you appreciated this video, hit that like button, and go check out my full coverage of Daniel Suarez's emotional Coca-Cola 600 win, along with my breakdown of the 95,000 fans who turned Charlotte into a memorial service for Kyle Busch. Both videos are on the channel right now. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.